Maggie Harper Bennett tightened her worn scarf around her neck as she stepped out into the crisp morning air. The wind nipped at her cheeks, but she was used to it. Life hadn't been easy for her since she lost her full-time job 6 months ago. Juggling odd jobs and late nights just to make rent was a constant battle, but Maggie had a kind heart and an unshakable determination to keep going. This morning, she'd managed to land a temporary cleaning gig at a local library. It wasn't glamorous, but it helped her scrape together enough for groceries and utilities. As she walked toward the bus stop, she clutched her thin coat tighter. Her thoughts drifted to her 5-year-old son, Jamie, who was staying with her neighbor for the day. Jamie's laughter was her anchor in the storm, the one thing that kept her moving forward when everything seemed impossible. The day passed slowly, but Maggie tried to focus on the small victories. By the time she clocked out, she'd made enough to buy dinner for her and Jamie. She stopped at the small diner near her apartment, a place she rarely visited since every penny mattered. The smells of sizzling bacon and fresh coffee welcomed her as she stepped inside, and for a brief moment she felt comforted by the warmth of the place. As she scanned the menu, counting the few bills in her pocket, Maggie noticed an elderly man sitting by the window. He wore a tattered coat that had seen better days and seemed lost in thought as he stared out at the street. His frail hands trembled slightly as he picked up his cup of coffee, and Maggie's heart ached for him. Something about his demeanor reminded her of her late grandfather, who had always taught her the importance of kindness. The waitress approached the man's table with the bill, placing it gently in front of him. Maggie saw him glance at it, then reach into his coat pocket, his expression shifting to alarm. He patted his other pocket, then looked on the chair beside him, but it was clear he didn't have his wallet. His shoulders sagged as he looked at the waitress, embarrassed. Maggie didn't think twice. She grabbed her wallet, walked over to the counter, and quietly asked to pay for his meal. "Are you sure?" the waitress asked, surprised. "Yes," Maggie said with a soft smile. "Please don't tell him. Just let him enjoy his day." The waitress nodded, and Maggie handed over a few crumpled bills. It wasn't much, but it was enough. As she turned to leave, she heard the elderly man call out to the waitress. "Wait. His voice was laced with worry. "I must have left my wallet at home." "It's already been taken care of," the waitress said gently. "Don't worry." The man looked around the diner, his eyes scanning the room until they landed on Maggie. "Excuse me, miss," he called out, his voice trembling but kind. "Did you pay for my lunch?" Maggie hesitated for a moment, then nodded. "I just thought, you looked like you could use a little help today." The man's eyes filled with tears, and he stood up slowly, leaning on his cane for support. "Thank you," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "You don't know how much this means to me." "It's no trouble," Maggie replied, feeling a bit embarrassed by the attention. "I hope you have a good day." As she turned to leave, the man called out again. "What's your name, dear?" "Maggie Harper Bennett," she said, glancing back with a small smile. "I'm Archie," he said, tipping his hat. "You've got a good heart, Maggie. Don't ever forget that." Maggie left the diner feeling lighter than she had in weeks. She didn't know why she'd felt so compelled to help Archie, but she was glad she had. It wasn't much, but maybe, just maybe, it had made a difference. What she didn't know was that Archie was no ordinary man, and her small act of kindness had set something extraordinary in motion. The following week passed in a blur for Maggie Harper Bennett. Between her cleaning shifts and caring for Jamie, she barely had a moment to rest. Still, her encounter with Archie lingered in her thoughts. There was something about the elderly man's kind smile and grateful demeanor that she couldn't shake. She wondered if he'd managed to retrieve his wallet, and hoped her small gesture had made things easier for him. Friday evening found Maggie walking home with a heavy bag of groceries in one hand and her son Jamie's crayon drawing tucked under her arm. As she approached her apartment building, a sleek black car parked outside caught her eye. It gleamed under the streetlights, completely out of place in her neighborhood. She climbed the steps quickly, glancing back at the car with unease when she heard a voice call out, "Miss Bennet." Maggie turned, startled, and saw none other than Archie stepping out of the car. He looked quite different from the day they met at the diner. Gone was the tattered coat. He now wore a tailored suit that fit him perfectly. Yet his warm smile was just as she remembered. "Archie," Maggie said, surprised. "I hope I'm not interrupting," he said gently. "I asked the staff at the diner about you, and they helped me find you. I wanted to thank you properly for what you did the other day." "Oh, you really didn't need to do that," Maggie said, her cheeks flushing. "It was just lunch. Nothing worth going out of your way for." Archie shook his head, his smile unwavering. "To you, it may have been just lunch. But to me, it was a moment of kindness I won't forget. Please let me treat you and Jamie to dinner tonight. It's the least I can do to repay you." Maggie hesitated, glancing down at the groceries in her hand. She had planned a simple meal for Jamie and herself, but Archie's sincerity made it hard to say no. "I don't know," she said cautiously. "Jamie's only 5. He can be a handful in restaurants." Archie chuckled. "Then we'll go somewhere family-friendly. I know just the place. I promise Jamie will have a wonderful time." After a moment's pause, Maggie nodded. "All right, just give me a little time to get Jamie ready." "Take as long as you need," Archie said. Half an hour later, Maggie and Jamie climbed into the back of Archie's car. Jamie's face lit up as he ran his hands over the smooth leather seats. "This car is so fancy," he exclaimed, his voice full of wonder. Archie chuckled. "I'm glad you think so, young man. I hope you're ready for some fun tonight." The restaurant Archie chose was vibrant and family-friendly with colorful lights, a play area for kids, and an inviting atmosphere. Jamie's eyes widened in delight when he saw the other children running around and the games lined up near the entrance. "Go ahead, Jamie," Maggie said, smiling as her son dashed off to join the other kids. Archie guided Maggie to a cozy booth, and a waiter soon appeared with menus. As they waited for their food, Maggie couldn't help but ask, "Why go through all this effort for us? You didn't have to." Archie smiled warmly. "Because what you did for me reminded me of the importance of kindness. I didn't plan to leave the house that day, but I'd been feeling a bit lonely and decided to visit the diner. It reminded me of a time when life was simpler, when I realized I'd forgotten my wallet." He chuckled lightly, shaking his head. "Well, I was humiliated. I didn't know what I was going to do. And then you stepped in without a second thought." Maggie relaxed slightly, finally understanding why he'd been so moved. "I've been in tough spots too," she said. "I know how overwhelming it can feel when you're stuck, even if it's just something small. I didn't want you to feel that way." Archie nodded, his eyes soft with gratitude. "And that's why it mattered so much. You gave me help without judgment, without knowing anything about me. It reminded me that the world isn't as cold as I sometimes think it is." Their conversation turned to lighter topics as their meals arrived. Maggie found herself laughing at Archie's stories about his younger days, running a small family business and navigating the challenges of life. Meanwhile, Jamie had the time of his life playing with the other children. His laughter echoed through the restaurant, and Maggie couldn't help but feel her heart swell as she watched him. When the evening came to an end, Archie drove them back to their apartment. He helped Maggie and Jamie out of the car and gave Jamie a small high five. "Thank you," Maggie said sincerely. "Tonight was wonderful. Jamie had such a good time, and so did I." "The pleasure was all mine," Archie said. "Jamie's a great kid. You're doing a wonderful job, Maggie. Never doubt that." As Archie got back into his car and drove away, Maggie stood on the curb for a moment, watching the taillights disappear. She felt lighter than she had in months. She didn't fully understand why Archie had been so determined to thank her. But for the first time in a long time, she felt like life might be starting to turn in the right direction. The next morning, Maggie Harper Bennett sat at the kitchen table with a steaming cup of tea, watching Jamie color with his usual focus. Though life was still a whirlwind of cleaning shifts and juggling bills, the warmth from the dinner with Archie lingered in her mind. "Mr. Archie was so nice," Mommy Jamie said suddenly, looking up from his crayons. "Do you think we'll see him again?" Maggie smiled softly. "Maybe," she said. "He does seem like someone we'd like to see again, doesn't he?" Jamie nodded enthusiastically, his little hand switching to a new crayon as he worked on drawing what he called a shiny car, like Mr. Archie's. The day passed quickly as Maggie worked another long shift, but when she returned home that evening, she was surprised to find a small cream-colored envelope tucked under her door. Inside was a short, handwritten note. "Dear Maggie, I hope this note finds you and Jamie well. I wanted to thank you again for your kindness and let you know how much I enjoyed dinner. If you'd ever like to meet again, as friends, I'd love to take a walk or share a cup of coffee. I don't have many people left in my life, so good company means a lot to me." It was signed, "Warm regards, Archie," followed by his phone number. Maggie stared at the note for a long moment, touched by its sincerity. She had been so focused on her own struggles that she hadn't considered what Archie's life might be like. His words about not having many people left stayed with her, and she decided to take him up on his offer. The following Saturday, after dropping Jamie off with her neighbor, Maggie called Archie and suggested they meet for coffee at a small cafe near the park. Archie was thrilled and arrived early, greeting her with a warm smile as she walked in. "Thank you for meeting me," Archie said as they settled into a cozy corner of the cafe. "Of course," Maggie said, smiling back. "You've been so kind. I think it's only fair to return the favor." Over coffee, their conversation flowed naturally. Archie shared more about his life, how he had built a small family business from scratch and watched it grow into something he never could have imagined. He spoke fondly of his late wife, who had been his partner in every sense of the word, and of his son who had moved abroad and now only called occasionally. "It's funny," Archie said, stirring his coffee thoughtfully. "You spend your life building something, thinking it will bring you happiness. And it does, in a way. But in the end, it's the people who matter. The connections you make." Maggie nodded, understanding his sentiment more than she expected. "I feel the same way. My son Jamie is my whole world. Some days are hard, but seeing his smile makes everything worth it." They spent hours talking, finding an easy friendship in their shared values and simple joys. Maggie was surprised by how much she enjoyed Archie's company. He had a calming presence and his stories were filled with warmth and wisdom. From that day on, Maggie and Archie became fast friends. He started visiting her and Jamie regularly, often bringing small surprises like fresh flowers for the kitchen table or a box of Jamie's favorite crayons. They would meet for coffee or strolls in the park, where Jamie would race ahead to play while Maggie and Archie talked about everything from their favorite books to the challenges of raising children. Archie even began to feel like a surrogate grandfather to Jamie, who adored him. He would patiently listen to Jamie's endless stories and laugh at his silly jokes, always making the little boy feel important. One sunny afternoon, as they sat on a park bench watching Jamie chase bubbles, Archie turned to Maggie with a thoughtful expression. "You've given me something I didn't realize I was missing," he said. Maggie looked at him curiously. "What's that?" "Family," Archie said simply. "Losing my wife and seeing my son so rarely left a bigger hole in my life than I knew how to fill. But spending time with you and Jamie has reminded me of what it feels like to belong again." Maggie felt a lump rise in her throat. She hadn't expected their friendship to mean so much to him, but hearing his words made her realize how much it meant to her, too. "Well, you're stuck with us now," Maggie said with a laugh, though her voice wavered with emotion. "Jamie's already decided you're his honorary grandpa." Archie chuckled, his eyes crinkling at the corners. "I'd be honored." From then on, Archie became a constant presence in their lives. He would join them for family dinners, help Jamie with school projects, and even teach Maggie a few tricks about budgeting and saving wisdom he'd picked up from his years of running a business. Though Maggie's life was still far from easy, having Archie's friendship gave her a sense of support and stability she hadn't felt in years. And for Archie, the warmth and laughter of Maggie and Jamie's small family brought a new purpose to his days. Their friendship wasn't built on grand gestures or extravagant gifts, but on the simple joys of connection, and the quiet understanding that sometimes, the people who come into your life unexpectedly can make all the difference. As the months passed, Maggie Harper Bennett and Archie's friendship deepened into something akin to family. Archie became a fixture in their lives, a steady source of warmth and wisdom. For Jamie, he wasn't just Mr. Archie anymore, he was Grandpa Archie, the one who always listened to his stories, helped with his homework, and never failed to bring a small treat whenever he visited. Maggie often wondered what she'd done to deserve someone like Archie in her corner. He never pried or made her feel inadequate for struggling, but she could tell he noticed the little things, how she reused Jamie's old school supplies or carefully budgeted every grocery trip. One afternoon, Archie and Maggie sat on her small living room couch while Jamie played with toy blocks on the floor. The sunlight streamed through the window, and Maggie offered Archie a cup of tea, her hands still damp from washing the few dishes they'd used for lunch. "Thank you, Maggie," Archie said, cradling the cup. "You've made this place feel so welcoming." "It's the least I can do after all you've done for us," she replied with a soft smile. Archie hesitated, looking down into his tea before speaking. "You know, I've been thinking a lot lately. I'm at a point in my life where I've been blessed with more than I need. And meeting you and Jamie reminded me that wealth is meaningless if it's not put to good use." Maggie frowned slightly, unsure where he was going with this. "Archie, you've already done so much. You don't need to." He raised a hand gently, cutting her off. "Hear me out, Maggie. I know you've been working hard to give Jamie a good life. And I also know it hasn't been easy. I see it in the way you stretch every dollar and how you're always putting his needs before your own. You've done an incredible job as a mother, but I want to help ease your burden." Maggie opened her mouth to protest, but Archie continued before she could. "I'd like to give you something not as a handout, but as a friend who cares about you and Jamie. I've set aside $5,000 for you. Use it however you see fit, whether it's for bills, savings, or giving yourself a little breathing room." Maggie's breath caught in her throat. "Archie, I can't accept that. That's too much." "It's not too much," Archie said firmly but kindly. "It's a small gesture compared to what you and Jamie have given me, a sense of purpose, a family I didn't think I'd ever have again. This isn't charity, Maggie, it's me investing in people I care about." Tears welled in Maggie's eyes as she tried to process his words. She'd spent so long fighting to stay afloat, to make sure Jamie had what he needed, that the idea of someone stepping in to help without expecting anything in return felt almost overwhelming. "I don't know what to say," she whispered, her voice trembling. "Say yes," Archie said with a gentle smile. "And let me do one more thing." "What do you mean?" Maggie asked, wiping her tears with the back of her hand. Archie leaned forward, his voice soft but resolute. "I've been thinking about Jamie's future. He's a bright, curious boy, and I know he's going to do great things someday. I want to help make sure he has the opportunity to chase his dreams, whatever they might be. I've set up a small fund for his college expenses. It's not something you need to worry about right now, but when the time comes, it'll be there for him." Maggie stared at him, stunned. "Archie, I don't know how to thank you. This is life-changing." Archie reached over and placed a comforting hand on hers. "You don't need to thank me, Maggie. You've already done more for me than you realize. Helping Jamie is the best way I can show my gratitude." That night, after Archie left, Maggie sat at the kitchen table long after Jamie had gone to bed, staring at the check he had given her. The amount felt surreal, a number she hadn't thought possible in her life. But more than the money, it was the kindness behind it that moved her. Archie didn't see her as a charity case. He saw her as a friend, someone worth investing in, someone who deserved to have a little weight lifted off her shoulders. And for the first time in years, Maggie allowed herself to hope not just for a better tomorrow, but for a future where Jamie could grow up with the opportunities she'd always dreamed of giving him. The next morning, as Jamie sat at the kitchen table coloring, Maggie pulled out a piece of paper and began writing a heartfelt letter to Archie. She poured her gratitude into every word, thanking him not just for the financial help, but for being a part of their lives in a way she hadn't realized they needed. When she finished, she folded the letter carefully and set it aside, making a mental note to deliver it the next time they met. Maggie smiled as Jamie showed her his latest drawing, a family portrait of the three of them standing under a bright sun. "Look, Mommy," Jamie said proudly. "I drew Grandpa Archie with us." Maggie hugged him tightly, her heart full of gratitude and hope. For the first time in a long time, she felt like they were no longer alone. They had Archie, and with his friendship and support, the future suddenly seemed brighter. A few weeks later, Maggie Harper Bennett stood in the small, sunlit park where she and Archie often brought Jamie to play. It had become their unofficial meeting spot, a place filled with laughter and warmth. Today was special. It was Jamie's 6th birthday, and Archie had insisted on throwing a small celebration for him. The park was alive with cheerful energy. Archie had arranged for colorful balloons, a picnic table filled with snacks, and even a little cake with a big 6-candle on top. A group of Jamie's neighborhood friends had come to join the fun, their excited chatter mixing with the sound of birds and rustling leaves. Jamie's eyes lit up as he raced around with his friends, showing off his new sneakers, Archie's birthday gift to him. Maggie watched from a distance, her heart swelling with gratitude. She glanced at Archie, who was sitting on the bench beside her, looking every bit the proud grandfather. "You really didn't have to do all this," Maggie said, her voice soft. Archie smiled, his eyes twinkling. "I did, Maggie. Jamie's a special kid, and he deserves to feel celebrated. Besides," he added with a playful wink, "it's been a while since I've planned a party. I think I still have a knack for it." Maggie laughed, shaking her head. "You're incredible, Archie. You've brought so much joy into our lives." Archie leaned back on the bench, his expression growing thoughtful. "You know, Maggie, when I first met you at that diner, I was feeling pretty lost. I'd been going through the motions, unsure of what to do with the rest of my life. But meeting you and Jamie changed everything. You reminded me that there's still so much good I can do, so much to be grateful for." Maggie placed a hand on his arm, her voice filled with sincerity. "You've done more for us than I can ever repay. But it's not just about the help. You've become family to us, Archie. Jamie adores you, and so do I." Archie smiled, his eyes misting slightly. "And you're my family too. I couldn't ask for better company in this chapter of my life." As the afternoon went on, the celebration wound down, and parents began picking up their children. Jamie was still buzzing with excitement, showing Maggie his haul of birthday cards and small gifts from his friends. When it was just the three of them left, Archie suggested one final surprise. He handed Jamie a brightly wrapped box. "Another one?" Jamie asked, his eyes wide with wonder. Archie chuckled. "This one's a little extra special." Jamie tore into the paper, revealing a children's science kit. His face lit up as he examined the colorful contents. "Wow, Grandpa Archie." "Thank you," Jamie exclaimed, wrapping his arms around Archie in a tight hug. "You're very welcome, buddy," Archie said, his voice warm. "I thought you might enjoy exploring and learning new things. Who knows? Maybe you'll grow up to be a scientist someday." As the sun began to dip lower in the sky, the three of them packed up the remnants of the party and headed back to Maggie's apartment. Archie stayed for dinner, enjoying a simple meal together at the small kitchen table. The atmosphere was filled with laughter and the kind of ease that only comes with true connection. Later that evening, as Maggie walked Archie to the door, he paused and turned to her. "Maggie," he said, his voice gentle, "I want you to know that no matter what happens, I'll always be here for you and Jamie. You've given me a purpose, a reason to keep going, and I'm grateful every day that our paths crossed." Maggie felt tears prick her eyes, but she smiled through them. And we'll always be here for you, Archie. You've become such an important part of our lives. We're so lucky to have you." As Archie hugged her goodbye and stepped out into the cool night air, Maggie watched him walk to his car, her heart full of gratitude and hope. They had all found something precious in one another, something money couldn't buy. They had found family.